Welcome to the Ernie Chambers Show.
Brothers and sisters, friends, enemies, and neutrals, to include everybody, I'm here again. This week, I'm going to do some reading. It's going to start with the situation facing former United States Congressman from Nebraska, Jeff Fortenberry. And because I'm going to go into that with some of my reading, I won't go into a lot of it now. That's just to alert you what's coming. This article is dated March 28th, 2015, 7 years ago, almost to the day. The headline, Fortenberry calls for Chambers' censure. This article was in the Omaha World Herald. I had given an analogy during a hearing before the Judiciary Committee on a bill to allow people to carry guns in places where alcohol is served. I don't like the idea of people being licensed to carry hidden guns. They call it concealed weapons anyway, but especially not in a bar or a tavern. So I was speaking against that kind of activity. That was the nature of the hearing. But prior to that specific one, we had a bill. And during the hearing on that previous bill, I talked about a shooting that had occurred in Omaha. This guy was accused of wanting to pull a robbery. He was trying to get away. So he had pulled his car into a location where the only way he could escape, if that was going to be possible, would be to climb on the hood of his car and jump over a fence. Well, the police had more or less surrounded that area. So when he got out of his car, unarmed, clearly unarmed, scrambled to the hood of his car and was moving toward this fence, a cop from behind shot him in the back and killed him. When he was questioned about it, he stated that he did the shooting because he thought the officers on the other side of the fence were threatened with possible death. As it turns out, and the point that I raised that they didn't, those officers were not worried about being shot. They were armed. The man was not hostile in any of his movements, so there was no reason for them to even draw their weapons. So this cop from the back shot him in the back and killed him. And I was discussing that as another example of police using excessive force unnecessarily. It bled over into the hearing that I touched on that was next, where they want to allow people to carry concealed weapons in places where liquor is sold. Well, I don't let those kind of matters die. And I would mention that if this is the way police do, who are supposedly trained, we don't need more guns on the street. But as it turns out, the man who was shot in the back and killed was not armed. So some of what happened in this hearing that this matter concerns came from an earlier hearing. And you're going to have to pardon me. I don't have a frog in my throat, but I got a cough. So excuse me. I usually don't drink water. But water is good for what ails you. Fortenberry did not attend the hearing where I made my comments. A local radio station in Lincoln picked it up from some little off-brand operation, took it out of context, made it into something it was not. It was picked up nationally, and when that happened, Fortenberry, being the political hack that he is, immediately jumped on board and decided to attack me. So the headline is, Fortenberry calls for Chambers' censure. add one more political figure to the list of those condemning State Senator Ernie Chambers for comparing police to ISIS. In a press release on Friday, U.S. Representative Jeff Fortenberry, Republican from Nebraska, said that the senator should be censured, quote, at a minimum, unquote, for his comment, particularly in light of, quote, his refusal to take back his words, unquote. Quote from Fortenberry, Senator Chambers' long history of bullying, bigotry, and hatred has reached a new low, Fortenberry said. This latest episode of condoning violence against police is reckless and contradicts the sacred duty of a lawmaker to protect society. It's ironic he would talk about the sacred duty of a lawmaker, which I'll touch on later. The controversy prompted additional security at the state capitol on Friday and was a topic on at least 2 national radio talk shows. It was the talk of the town and the nation. A week ago, Chambers asked a senator during a committee hearing why people should be permitted to carry concealed handguns in bars and restaurants that sell liquor. After the senator who introduced the bill mentioned that it was partly due to concerns about extremist groups like ISIS, Chambers said, "My ISIS is the police." They left out much of the conversation between me and the senator. Chambers has refused to apologize and has defended his comments, saying he will continue to criticize police when they misbehave, use excessive force, and are not held accountable. ISIS has beheaded hostages during its violent takeover of parts of Syria and so forth. Now, I didn't say the police behead people. I didn't say they do anything that ISIS does to anybody. In trying to make this senator and others who may have felt like he did about police, I told him that my police, my ISIS, the police are my ISIS. And then I pointed out that ISIS has never menaced me, the neighborhood, my home, or my family. But the police have done that. So the fear that you have of ISIS that you talked about, and the fear that these other people have of ISIS that you talked about, is the fear that we have of the police. We fear nothing from ISIS. They're not going to come here and harm us in any way. That was the background. State Senator Bo McCoy of Omaha, who first asked Chambers to apologize, said Friday he has received hundreds of emails about the issue, with only a handful defending Chambers. McCoy said he has reviewed legislative rules and additional options, but has not yet decided what to do. Quote, "I doubt this story is over." And that was Fortenberry's request that the legislature censure me. And I'm going to go more into the ISIS issue, but I must first handle former Representative Fortenberry. When I read that he was indicted on 3 counts of lying to the FBI, I knew that he was going to be convicted. The FBI will not come after anybody, and especially an elected official, and in addition, make it public by the filing of charges, will have the goods. When that happened, I knew it was curtains, the show was over. So I wrote this memo to Fortenberry before he left Nebraska to go stand trial in California. The crimes he committed by accepting money from a foreigner during a campaign for the purpose of a campaign contribution, which is made against federal law, occurred in California. Therefore, since the criminal activity occurred there, that's where the trial would take place. His lawyers tried to get the court to move it to Nebraska, feeling that with the majority of people in Nebraska overwhelmingly be white, Fortenberry would have an all-white jury. They would be his colleagues, be his constituents, excuse me, and therefore give him a free pass. The judge refused to allow the trial to occur in Nebraska, but rather required it to take place in California, where the violation of the law occurred. So this is what I wrote to Fortenberry. From former State Senator Ernie Chambers to soon to be former U.S. Congressman Jeff Fortenberry, to let him know I believe they had the goods on him, regarding recompense for your unprovoked attack upon me. How sweet it is. Here is what I wrote. In the parlance of the day, our paths crossed virtually a few years ago when you, without provocation, sneak attacked me from ambush in the media, due to my having declared by way of analogy during a committee hearing on carrying concealed weapons in bars that, quote, my ISIS is the police, unquote, and that article is attached. The statement was made as a rejoinder to the introducer's assertion that the introduction was justified due to fear of ISIS. Serendipitously, that means a very fortunate coincidence. Serendipitously, the metaphorical worm has turned, and the serious federal charges lodged against you are in no way metaphorical, but rather literal. A wily, cagey political operative such as yourself should in no way be surprised that I detect a delectable irony in your current situation. Because your trial in California will start in a few days, I must rush to get this into your hands so that you may have something to distract your obviously and justifiably troubled mind. Rhyme being my strong suit when dealing with politicians, because they make such alluring targets, I shall employ rhyme herein. And in the following full-page ode, if you will, dedicated to you and the matter of lying. By way of an introduction to that ode on the following page, here is a warm-up. A well-worn maxim goes, one reaps just what one sows. Most accept the maxim's words as true. You, of course, did not surmise that some of your political lies would boomerang and put the bite on you. Gleefully, opponents will gloat that you are in a sinking boat, and when they'll lie, then they'll lay a wager. I will bet when your criminal trial is done, you shall be the guilty one who's taunted by the public. You're all wet. And this is the ode that I wrote to Jeff Fortenberry. Liar, liar, pants on fire. Then the subhead. Fortenberry faces 3 felonies. Feds say he lied. Then this verse from 2 Corinthians. In the mouths of 2 or 3 witnesses shall every word be established. And this is the ode to Jeff Fortenberry. Generally speaking, unctuous liars, I do not waste verse on. Your travails could not befall a more deserving person. I will grant your sordid little melodrama's fate. Idle minds and crack reporters, it may titillate. I'll invoke Sir Walter Scott before I take my leave. What a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive. Attached here to an item triggered by your present scene. When you, Klansman that you are, decided to intervene in a typical race-based anti-Ernie hue and cry raised by gutless politicians deathly afraid to try one-on-one to take me on any major issue. dreading to be shredded and discarded like used tissue. You and their loud clamorings to all of you made sense. My conclusion, though, is vindicated by events. George Floyd murdered by police in plain sight, and the rest prove my ISIS is the police, north, south, east, and west. You and they were wrong as two left shoes, as facts bear out. Were the facts endowed with vocal cords, wrong, wrong, they'd shout. Hence, as sure as Martha Washington's maiden name was Custis, being charged with lying is for you poetic justice. Odds are, guilty as charged, the federal jury's verdict will be. Am I right or wrong? We'll have to patiently wait and see. Here my rhyming ends, and I relinquish now the floor. Fortenberry soon shall be consigned to days of yore. Now I'm going to hold up something. Fortenberry convicted on all counts, as I predicted before he went out to California. And under that evil-looking photograph that was in Omaha World Herald, it says, Fortenberry jury reaches verdict in less than 2 hours. U.S. Representative Jeff Fortenberry now could face up to 5 years in prison for each of his 3 convictions. Although I attended school at OPS, I can multiply 3 times 5, which equals 15. Although supervised release is also a possibility. Fortenberry, shown last week at the federal courthouse, said he plans to appeal. Naturally, he would. And here's another irony. The law requires when a U.S. representative leaves office, a special election must be called by the governor within 90 days. That is because the Congress directly represents the people. The Senate is comprised of people who represent the state. Therefore, each state under the Constitution, no matter how large or small, gets 2 senators. Those 2 senators represent the state as an entity. The second house, or lower house as it's called, is based on population, whereas each state gets 2 senators regardless of size. When it comes to representation by population, each representative represents 400 and something thousand people. I say 400 something thousand because there's been a new census and they haven't yet calculated how many representatives a state will have. But Nebraska, based on its population, has 3. If a senator whose function is to represent the state leaves office before his or her term ends, the governor appoints a senator, because that senator theoretically does not represent the people, but rather the state itself. But when a representative of the people leaves, then the people will make a selection. The governor sets the special election date, but the people will cast their votes. Whoever is elected, oh, and by the way, it'll be against a Republican over here, a Democrat over there, and the parties, since there will be no primary, will select who will represent their party. The Republicans will select a Republican who might wind up being a present Nebraska state senator named Mike Flood, and he was a former state senator. He was there before. And the Democrats have nominated or selected a current Nebraska state senator, Patty Pansing Brooks, with whom I serve. She is a very intelligent woman, thoroughly prepared, competent, as a state senator and a force to be reckoned with. I intend, when that special election takes place, to not cast a vote for her. Why? Because only the people in the first congressional district can cast a vote in that election, because that is the district that Fortenberry represents. That is a brief little lesson in civics, and I hope that people have a clear understanding of what is going on now. I think the date for that election is June 28th, but I stand to be corrected. And the irony, as I stated, is that the date of that special election is the date that Fortenberry will be sentenced. He was convicted on 3 counts. He can get 5 years for each. If he is sentenced for the max, which I don't think he will be, it would be 15 years. He doesn't have a criminal history, meaning he has been caught before, tried, and convicted. In the House, a convicted felon can serve, but he would have to serve after he's served his time in prison, then be elected again by the public. But let me go ahead and get started on this. This is going to deal with the ISIS matter. This article is dated March 25th of 2015. Most of this will be just straight reading. Chambers's police comments rankle. This appeared in the Omaha World Herald. The political firestorm sparked by State Senator Ernie Chambers' comparison of police to the Islamic State heated up even more on Thursday as Governor Pete Ricketts and several senators joined the chorus of condemnation. Ricketts, in a press release Thursday morning, called Chambers' comments that he would use a gun if he had one and was a violent person to defend himself against police is irresponsible. The governor called on Chambers to apologize. Here's what I said, and it was in the context of the police having shot that man in the back. I said, because these police, and I'd given other examples of Black men being shot and even some white guys, and when they were shot, I intervened on behalf of their families to get police reports and give them information that they could use if they were going to try a wrongful death case. But at any rate, I had stated that I'm not a violent man, but if I had a gun and I had a confrontation with a policeman, knowing how they do people, I would shoot first and ask questions later, like they say the police should do. I didn't say a person should just shoot the police. Everything I say is in context. Everything these white people do is taken out of context to create an image that they want their uninformed white people to accept, and they're readily accepted. Anybody who knows me is aware that I don't carry knives, guns. I've never been involved where I used violence against anybody. But continuing, this is additional from what Ricketts wrote. As public officials, we are held to a higher standard, and we should be. No one should ever suggest the use of violence against law enforcement officials, unquote, the governor said. Quote, Senator Chambers' comments were out of line. He didn't give everything I said. I'm not a violent man. I don't carry a gun. But if I had a gun and had a confrontation with the police, I would shoot first and ask questions later. Because you all have seen from police video cams that people who had no gun were shot by the police. People fleeing from the police were shot dead. A young Black kid in Chicago was shot 16 times in the back by police. The police lied and said he was attacking them. When they finally had to release the video cam, he didn't have a gun and he was moving away from them when the police opened fire. Those are the images in my mind, plus the fact that Black people had been shot in the back by police. The governor knew that he was taking my words out of context, but he had an angle that he wanted to pursue. And these white people will not deal with me one-on-one, not the governor, not the attorney general, not Mayor Stothert, not the chief of police. For some reason, they fear this black man. I carry no weapons. I was arrested once and charged with carrying a concealed weapon, but the photograph of me in handcuffs getting into the paddy wagon showed me wearing a tight-fitting t-shirt where I could not conceal a weapon. A gun that I had was in the car, and we were leaving the barber shop. So I didn't leave that gun in the barber shop. I had it in the seat of the car, and we went over to Iowa. Vivian Strong had been shot, and this station in Iowa asked me would I give an interview, and I did. I talked about the problems in Omaha, the fact that these young kids were in this empty unit of the projects. The housing authority allowed them to have record dances there. They had not broken in. There was no burglary, no robbery. It was an empty unit on the end of the road. So they were having a dance. When the police came, the kids, as kids will do, came outside and saw them and started running and were laughing. Vivian Strong was 13, and this guy named Loader pulled his 38 and shot her in the back of the head. He couldn't say she was a threat. She was running, and he shot her in the back of the head and killed her. I went over to Iowa, and when I got to the station, and after I had made a few comments, somebody came in and whispered to the station manager that the local police in Omaha had called to see if I was still at the station. And since I was, they informed the police I was. And I said, you can tell them they can listen to the program if they want to. But we had come back across the river. We were dropping one of the other barbers off. So I guess they started following us when we came back across the river. We didn't pay any attention because we didn't know that was what they were going to do. So we were proceeding out 30th Street, going north toward Ames. We got to about Denny Street, and that's when a cop car pulled up beside us, and then they turned on their lights. So Dan pulled over, and another cop car was behind us. No, that's not where it was. They started following us there. So Dan drove, we went down Spencer, I believe, and we turned and started coming back south toward Lake. And we may have been beyond Spencer, but at any rate, that's when they put the lights on because there were additional cruisers. I was trying to recollect where all the police cars came from. So we got out of the car, and I told somebody who was out watching, call the mayor and tell him, excuse me, what is happening. And one of the cops started laughing. He said, the mayor is the one who told us to arrest you. And then so that I could hear, I don't know who he was talking to, he said, this is whoever his name was, and we got the big fish. That's exactly what he said. So when we went downtown, they charged me with carrying a concealed weapon. I forget what the bond was, but somebody had contacted a bondsman and he was down there and we got out. That charge, when it went to trial, was dismissed, as were 3 other charges on 3 other occasions when I was arrested, one time on the steps of the barber shop. I have a record from the FBI when they were compiling a file on me where they kept track of these arrests and the dismissal of all these charges. In one of my arrests, I said, I want to post bond. How much is my bond? And the cop said, you don't have to pay any bond. You don't have to post bond. I said, well, what am I charged with? He said, well, you're not charged with anything. I said, well, what was I arrested for? He said, well, the FBI wanted a mug shot and fingerprints. And I thought that was a lie by the cops. But when I got my records from the FBI. One of the statements gave a rundown of their watching me. I was 26 years old at the time, a young desperado, I guess from their point of view. They did not have a mug shot or fingerprints of me on record anywhere. So as quiet as it's kept, that confirmed what the police officer had told me sometime prior. But anyway, the governor had gotten involved. Let me find my place. State Senator Bo McCoy of Omaha first asked Chambers to apologize for the comments on Wednesday, and his critics have now grown to include Governor Ricketts, Omaha Mayor Gene Stothert, Omaha Police Chief Todd Schmaderer, and Nebraska Attorney General Doug Peterson. Moi. The man who has never been arrested for assaulting anybody, never drew a gun or a knife on anybody, and the four top officials in this state, and then a fifth one in the person of a member of the US Congress, attacked me for words, which shows, I usually say a loaded brain is more powerful than a loaded gun. I guess my loaded mouth was more powerful than all of their weapons. Continuing, state lawmakers spent most of Thursday morning debating Chambers' comment during a committee hearing last week that, quote, my ISIS is the police. While some senators defended his free speech rights and labeled his comment hyperbole, most said it was inappropriate and went beyond the African-American senators' often fiery and inflammatory speeches about police misconduct. They had heard similar words before. McCoy, as well as the governor, said his comments could promote violence against law enforcement. But if I've been making these comments down through the years, how is it going to provoke violence? But carrying on, said McCoy, I believe this has crossed the line when we are endangering lives of the people who are supposed to protect us. Said McCoy, a Republican who often clashes with Chambers, a registered independent who has served a record 40 years in the legislature. One freshman senator, David Schnur, I call him Schnook, he had been appointed by the governor to fill an empty seat, went a step further, asking the 77-year-old senator to resign by 10 a.m. Monday. And when he said that, I laughed out loud. Or as the kid said when he saw Santa Claus, I laughed when I saw him in spite of myself. Said this Schnook, I'm going to take a stand and it looks like I'll be by myself, Schnur said. I find it pathetic that nobody wants to ask for any accountability. It's poor Senator Chambers this, poor Senator Chambers that. He has the right to speak, which I do, and I constantly did it, and he and none of them liked it. As he did Wednesday, Chambers defended his comments, saying he will continue to criticize police when they misbehave and are not held accountable. Chambers said, I bet no one, not one of the people who speak on this floor has read the transcript. They get carried away by what they hear on talk radio, he said. Chambers said he would not apologize nor resign, and that he had spent a lifetime being set upon. Quote, it started happening to me in grade school when I was called a little black Sambo. That's a misquote. I said, when the teacher read Little Black Sambo and the little white kids were allowed to look at me and laugh. The kids laughed and the teacher did nothing about it. This is just par for the course. I don't expect you to understand what I'm talking about, Chambers added later. At one point during the heated debate, Chambers said he had to leave the floor to deal with an irate white person who was harassing his legislative aide at his Capitol office. These people would know that I wasn't in the office. They would know that the ones working for me were two black females. Only one was working at that time. So I went down because she had called. I went downstairs immediately and I wanted to confront him. And I wanted to see what he had on his mind. I've always told him I'm an easy target. I don't run from anybody. I don't hide from anybody. And I went downstairs. By the time I got there, he had left. The man left and a Capitol security officer came to check out the situation. No arrests were made. Even before that, Chambers said his legislative office has fielded several ugly phone calls criticizing him. And I had told the lady who works with me, don't even argue with these fools. Or if you must say something, tell them, bless you, my child, and sin no more, lest the worst thing come upon you. You obviously are in need of prayer. And I said, before you finish that, they'll hang up, which they invariably did. The political tempest began on Wednesday after comments surfaced in which Chambers compared police to a terrorist Islamic group. I told you that it was an analogy. The fear you have for ISIS is the fear we have for the police. My ISIS is the police. In other words, the ones we are worried about in the Black community are the police, not ISIS, and any fool would understand that. And then it talks about the public hearing again. And this is what the article goes on to say. That comment sparked press releases condemning the senator. The senator should be looking for ways to improve public safety instead of comparing police officers to terrorists, Mayor Stothert said. Police Chief Schmaderer called Chambers' comments unbecoming of a state senator. Attorney General Peterson said the senator's words were, quote, the most offensive statement I have ever heard made by a public official, unquote. He hadn't heard much, had he? Senator Les Seiler of Hastings, who presided over the committee hearing in which the original comments were made, said he did not find them alarming, and nobody in that room did. Quote, I don't think it was anything other than Ernie being Ernie, said Seiler, chairman of the legislature's Judiciary Committee. Chambers made the remarks based on a recorded transcript of the hearing during an exchange with Bellevue Senator Tommy Garrett, as Garrett made his closing statements about Legislative Bill 635, his bill to allow concealed handguns in bars and restaurants that sell liquor. Chambers asked Garrett what patrons were so afraid of that they needed to carry concealed weapons into such establishments. Garrett responded that people are insecure about crime and the radicalized world situation, Garrett said. You were making a very good point earlier about ISIS and ISIL and the Taliban. ISIS stands for Islamic State in Syria. ISIL was Islamic State in the Levant. The Levant is a larger area than just Syria. Chambers, who has frequently criticized Omaha police, then criticized Douglas County Attorney Don Klein for not prosecuting an Omaha police officer, Alvin Lugard, in connection with the February 23rd fatal shooting of a robbery suspect, Danny Elrod, who happened to be white. Ernie Chambers also spoke of the injustice in other police-related shootings. Quote, my home isn't threatened by ISIS, it's threatened by the police, he said. The police are licensed to kill us, children, old people, everybody. Chambers said he didn't have a gun and wasn't a man of violence, but said that if he were, he would use the weapon on the protection or for protection against the police. I would want to shoot him first and ask questions later, as they say the cop ought to do. The comments were first publicized by a talk show Friday on Lincoln radio station KFOR. That spawned a story by Nebraska Watchdog, which was picked up by Fox News. Then the story was cited by McCoy, a Republican who has often clashed with Chambers, a registered Democrat. All of this supposedly that I've been doing, all of this terror that I spread didn't make its way into the legislature until it was picked up and misrepresented by a local station in Lincoln whose reporter was not there. Then some little rag wrote about it. Then it was picked up by Fox Network. And when that happened, here comes McCoy, a member of the legislature who did not attend the hearing, raising the cane that he did. Said Mayor Stothard, why would any elected official state if he had a gun, he would shoot a police officer? She took it out of context. I told you what I said. She continued, he owes an apology not only to Omaha police officers, but to every citizen of Omaha. That's stupid. Sheer stupidity and the racism from a female member of the Ku Klux Klan. Chambers was off the floor when McCoy spoke. That's when he's emboldened. But later, he defended his comments and said they were in the context of criticizing the lack of prosecution of this cop who shot the man in the back on that Tuesday. Danielle Sivington of Papillion, an attorney and part-time waitress who attended Friday's hearing, said Chambers's comments were not smart, but were twisted out of context. She was there. She was a white woman. She is a lawyer. My remarks, she said, were twisted out of context. Quote from her, I know from past experience that Senator Chambers gets riled up, said Savington, who also opposes allowing concealed guns in restaurants where liquor is sold. Chambers attributed the dust-up to McCoy's feeling stung by Chambers' criticism that McCoy used his legislative post to gain a new job. McCoy was recently hired by Charles Herbster, a Falls City, Nebraska businessman who bankrolled McCoy's unsuccessful gubernatorial campaign last year, and he put more than $1 million into that campaign. And Herbster himself is now running for governor. And what I had said when I found out how much Herbster put into McCoy's campaign, I could lose the run for governor for a lot less money than McCoy was spending. Then this article talks about the ongoing backlash and how I was unapologetic, would not take my words back, and the number of white people continued to grow. And I still went there every day, carrying no weapon, saying what I always had to say. Here's an article dated March 27. He should resign. He should apologize. He should speak his mind, but choose his words more carefully. Senators need to condemn others, not just him, when they make hurtful statements, inartful statements. Every one of those views and more were expressed Thursday as a political firestorm raged white hot over State Senator Ernie Chambers' comments comparing police with the Islamic State extremist group. No, what they should have said was what I said, that you're afraid of ISIS. My ISIS is the police. ISIS has never menaced us in the way that the police have. Continuing. Fellow state lawmakers mostly criticized Chambers and so forth. At the end of the deluge, the state's longest serving state senator said he was not resigning or apologizing. He said the only reason it had become such a dust-up was because it had been picked up by national media. Quote, you all wouldn't be talking about this otherwise, Chambers told reporters. This is a monkey see, monkey do kind of thing. Chambers, who frequently criticizes police conduct in inflammatory speeches, got an earful during a morning-long debate Thursday. Well, if I constantly do it, why had they never said anything before? It hadn't been on Fox News before. Papillion Senator Jim Smith said there were simply no comparisons in our society to the barbaric attacks of ISIS, which have included beheading and burning hostages, and I never made that comparison. I said that white people are afraid of ISIS. The police are the ones who put that fear in us. First year Omaha Senator Brett Lindstrom, who is now running for governor, said he was pulling his name as a co-sponsor of Chambers's bill to repeal the death penalty because, quote, I no longer want my name associated with the senator who would make such comments, unquote. However, he voted not only to repeal the death penalty, but voted to override the governor's veto. Omaha Senator Bob Christ, who was in the committee room when Chambers made his ISIS comment last Friday, said he was embarrassed that he didn't condemn them then. You know why he didn't condemn them then? He didn't see a need to. He knew the context in which I'd made them, and I'd made those kind of comments before. Quote, one of our first responsibilities is to protect public safety, said Omaha Senator Robert Hilkeman. How can we carry out that responsibility when we have a member of this body say he would shoot a police officer and ask questions later? You got somebody there who said that and other things, and had often said it. I won't read all of this, but I will skip down to this. Others asked why outrage was not expressed when welfare recipients were called leeches. Chambers said he was the only state senator who criticized a Republican campaign ad last fall that tried to link former state Senator Brad Ashford, who was elected to the U.S. House, with ISIS beheadings. They showed ISIS beheading, the amount that was on television, people on their knees with hoods, and linked Senator Ashford with it and said he supported that. Not a peep was made. No criticism, and the local television stations put it on. I didn't say that police did that. They said Ashford supported the beheadings by ISIS. While Chambers said his comments were nothing he hasn't said before, McCoy, who has frequently clashed with the senator, said they could promote violence against law enforcement. I believe this has crossed the line, McCoy said Thursday. Legislative rules permit lawmakers to impeach or censure a lawmaker, but it appears that has happened only once in 1995 to a white senator. 15 state senators, after Friday's debate, gathered for a photograph and held up #SupportBlue signs to show their backing of law enforcement. Omaha Senator Jeremy Nordquist said he was preparing a legislative resolution to do the same. They are brave, as Malcolm said, when they got bombs and they got tanks, a lot of company along with them. Not one of them confronted me. But there was somebody who also lives in our community who wrote a commentary for the Omaha Star. This was written April 3rd, 2015 by Omaha attorney Timothy L. Ashford. The headline, Senator Chambers is ISIS, ? And this I'm going to read verbatim without commenting. Quote, no Viet Cong ever called me an N, said Muhammad Ali when he refused induction into the United States Army to fight in the Vietnam War in 1967. Just as North Omaha Blacks were not attacked by the Vietnamese, the quote, terrorist Muslim group ISIS has not terrorized Blacks in North Omaha. Quote, my ISIS is the police, unquote, said Nebraska Senator Ernie Chambers last week during a legislative hearing. Quote, nobody from ISIS ever terrorized us as a people as the police do daily. If I carried a gun, I'd want to shoot him, the cop, first and then ask questions later, like they say the cop ought to do, unquote. Chambers states the entire gun statement was taken out of context by critics. After more than 44 years as a state senator in District 11, to quote a popular song, quote, Nobody knows the trouble Ernie has seen regarding police misconduct. Nobody knows but Jesus. For more than 4 decades, when the police and the Black community harass, intimidate, beat up, or kill a citizen sometimes, and more often than not, Senator Chambers is called. He could probably fill an encyclopedia with all the reports of police misconduct he has received. So in this instance, Senator Chambers speaks with more than 4 decades of experience regarding police misconduct in North Omaha. Some of his critics state that Senator Chambers should do something about the police misconduct. He wrote, advocated, and passed the Nebraska bill to have an independent prosecutor hold a grand jury investigation whenever any person dies in police custody, among other things. Why would the greatest senator in Nebraska history and an elected Black official make such an outrageous statement as the police are ISIS in his community? Now, let us admit this nation is racially divided on the issue of police misconduct in the Black community. Most whites believe the police can do no wrong, and most Blacks believe the police discriminate against Black people. For example, recently grand juries failed to indict white police officers in the killing of African Americans Michael Brown and Eric Garner. Quote, "So just the facts, ma'am, just the facts," unquote. Quoting Sergeant Joe Friday from the popular 1960s television show Dragnet, that is the way we should decide if Senator Chambers' statement is true or false. Also, should he have made the statement at all? Let us examine the facts of the police versus the terroristic group ISIS in North Omaha. ISIS has never harassed, beaten, injured, or killed any Black citizen in North Omaha. On the other hand, as far back as the 1960s, the police have killed Black citizens such as Vivian Strong, George Bivens, Marvin Ammons, and numerous other Blacks in North Omaha. Last year, the most recent in a long line of allegations of police brutality and misconduct occurred when the police were caught attacking Octavius Johnson on video, which is on the internet. He has filed a lawsuit against the police. Recently, the United States Department of Justice stated they found racial discrimination in the arrest of Black citizens by the police department in Ferguson, Missouri, where African-American Michael Brown was shot and killed by a white police officer. And he was unarmed, by the way. On any weekday, just go sit in a courtyard in the Douglas County courts, and you will see that although Blacks are approximately 10% of the Omaha population, they are approximately 75% or more of the defendants in court that particular day. Does this racial discrimination exist in the arrest and conviction of Black citizens in North Omaha? Based upon these facts and many more, a logical person can understand the reason police are viewed as ISIS by Senator Chambers. It is funny that it appears none of the residents in his district are shocked, offended, or surprised by his statement that the police are ISIS in their community. The residents in District 11 can recall Senator Chambers writing letters to tell him he is wrong or vote him out. However, it appears they agree with his statement. For example, if you take a poll of Black males between the age of 15 to 35 in North Omaha, 99% would agree with his statements. It appears the majority of people shocked, offended, or surprised by Senator Chambers' statement are not Black males between the ages of 15 and 35, and they do not live in his North Omaha district. As an attorney in solo practice since 1998, I have received numerous complaints of police misconduct and police brutality. Oh, and by the way, one of the days when they were talking about me being so bad, I said, I hear by quote Santa Claus by way of my defense. And then I just at the top of my lungs said, ho, 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 and to let them know the contempt I had for them. Some Nebraska state senators has asked for Senator Chambers to resign. They've made speeches condemning his statements on the legislative floor. They want to vote to censure him and demanded that he apologize for stating the police are ISIS in his community. Nebraska Governor Pete Ricketts demanded an apology and issued a statement which read, quote, "At a time when we need to develop better relationships between law enforcement and our communities, Senator Chambers' comments are irresponsible and only promote distrust and the potential for violence," unquote. In case the governor missed the videotapes of police beatings over the years, there has always been violence by police against Black people in North Omaha and all over the country. Also, why does the governor believe we have to improve the community relations with police? White residents in predominantly white West Omaha are not complaining about the police. Maybe it is because police protect and serve in West Omaha and the police harass, kill, and unjustly arrest Black citizens in North Omaha. If the police community relations were good in North Omaha, citizens would probably give the police more tips on the unsolved murders and other crimes. Some believe Senator Chambers should be investigated for the statement the police are ISIS, and they want to file terroristic threat charges against him. One guy did in a little town in Nebraska. It got nowhere. Good luck with the criminal prosecution of an elected state senator who is exercising his First Amendment right to freedom of speech during a legislative hearing. What these idiots don't know, the Constitution of the United States and of Nebraska make senators immune from being sued for anything said during debate or senatorial activities. Continuing. If the police do not act like ISIS in North Omaha, all those elected white politicians in a position of power, the governor and state senators, should demand that the United States Department of Justice conduct an investigation of the predominantly Black North Omaha community, similar to the Department of Justice Ferguson investigation, to prove Senator Chambers is wrong. The results would surprise the white elected officials. Sometimes when you are right, you are right. Unfortunately, for those individuals who live in District 11, Senator Chambers is not the only one who believes the police in North Omaha act like the terroristic group ISIS. Although some people do not like what he said, it is Senator Chambers' job as an elected state senator in District 11 to be the voice for the voiceless Black males 15 through 35 in North Omaha who are constantly terrorized by the police. Just as Ali was right, Senator Chambers is right when he states in his community, the police are his ISIS. And then he gives his phone number where you can reach him. These white people deliberately pretend not to understand. What I'm going to do next week or at another time, read some of these comments that appeared in the public pulse from citizens who didn't seem to all feel like Nebraska citizens, senators and politicians. But here's something that was printed in the Washington Post. It shows it's about King James. "We're desperate," said Mike Kovach, a Cleveland Police Department officer. He could be second in command in ISIS. If he's got an outside jump shot, we'd love him. Now, this is what a police officer said in Cleveland. "We're desperate. He could be second in command in ISIS. If he's got a good outside jump shot, we'd love him." He could be second in command. That's what a white police officer said in Cleveland. So I put at the bottom of that, Senator Schnur will probably be on the next jet to Cleveland demanding the resignation of police officer Mike Kovach. But here's the paragraph that goes with that picture and that statement. Kovach has lived all 47 of his years in the city. Quote, Cleveland by birth, Cleveland by choice, unquote, said he. He has never seen a professional sports championship. This spring, Cleveland is pinning its desperate hopes to end its title drought, 55 years going on forever, on another Northeast Ohioan by birth, and although roundabout by choice. And that's LeBron James. And then this is the comment that police officer made. We're desperate. He could be second in command in ISIS. If he's got an outside shot, we'd love it. You see how idiotic, how racist these white people in the Nebraska legislature are. I say idiotic and racist applies to Governor, what's his name? Ricketts, Attorney General Peterson, Mayor Stothert, and people know how idiotic she is. And all these others who pretended to be so outraged when I said that the police are our ISIS. I did not say the police cut our heads off. I talked about what I was referring to by telling what ISIS has not done that the police do. They have not terrorized our neighborhood. They have not endangered us in our homes. Around that time, in addition to that white man having been shot dead in the back, and I was the only one who spoke out about it, a group of cops up on Seward Street, 30-something in Seward, attacked Black people in this home. There was a Black woman in a wheelchair. They knocked her out of the wheelchair. They took the cell phone of one of the residents and took some part out of it, which would have recorded it. And they subsequently were charged with tampering with evidence. The only reason that was handled differently was because a neighbor across the street videotaped the entire thing. It showed the cop cars coming up, them jumping out, grabbing Black people before they even went into the house, slamming a couple of them to the ground, on top of them punching and beating them, all on video. And had it not been videotaped, the police would have lied. And because of what had been done, they had to accept as true what this elderly Black woman said when she pointed out how they stormed into her house. They had to acknowledge that because they did run in. But the lie they were going to tell was that, and did tell, was that they were threatened. And therefore they had to break into the house. And when they ran into the house, they didn't talk about knocking her out of the wheelchair. The people in the house talked about that. But the cops' lies were in the process of being believed until that video that the neighbor from across the street made available, and some of it was shown on television. The cops had begun weaving that traditional lie that they always tell and that the officials pretend to believe. And these are the ones I'm supposed to not comment about when they mess over us and the people in this community. Never will I bite my tongue. Never will I apologize. And I got no response at all when I wrote to the governor, the chief of police, the mayor, the FBI, the US attorney, the US Department of Alcohol, Firearms, and Tobacco, the US Justice Department, asking that they conduct not only an investigation, but those who are in a law enforcement capacity, round up the purveyors of illegal firearms in our community. And that I knew these law enforcement people could find out who were selling these guns because the teenagers knew. And if the teenagers knew where to get these guns, the cops knew. Some said that the cops were supplying guns. Some have said that when people turn these guns into the police, on those days when there's amnesty, they wind up back on the streets. I pointed out that I knew they could find out who's selling these guns because the gun used to kill that lady officer, and a cop told me that she should never have been killed in that incident because she was sent into the backyard where this man was when there were higher ranking officers who, if he was to be confronted, should have confronted them. She was a rookie. They sent her back there and she was shot dead. Well, the gun was recovered and they traced it to a pawn shop in a little town in Alabama. And you mean to tell me they cannot find the source of these guns? And there is an outbreak now of gun violence in Omaha. What I want to do is contact the governor and ask him to set up what they call a multidisciplinary force. It would be the state patrol, the county sheriff, and unfortunately, they must be included, the Omaha police, request that the FBI cooperate, and they get together and find the source of these guns in the same way they put together such a interdisciplinary force when these white kids were having these keg parties. They get these kegs of alcohol, go to farming areas or barns and all get drunk and some would be in these accidents. They said, we have to go to the source and find out who is supplying these kids with alcohol. I said to do the same thing. Find those who are supplying these youngsters with these guns and the oldsters also. They're what are called straw purchasers. If I have a license to carry a gun or to own one, I can go buy guns legally. There's not much in the way of a background. I can buy any number of guns that I want to. Then I resell them on the street. That's the way a lot of guns get onto the streets. Guns are stolen. The police know this. Why will they not do anything? Because the guns have not been turned against white people. But when a gun was used against a white cop, they traced it all the way to this pawn shop in Alabama. One day I'd gone in the barber shop when I was still working there. There were some teenagers, and I asked, if I wanted a gun, could some of you find a gun for me, do you think? And one of them said, Senator Chambers, I could get you a gun quicker than I can buy you a candy bar, because there are not grocery stores proliferating in our community. Yes, I am bitter toward the police. Yes, I believe that they are liars. Yes, I believe that they are murderers. And yes, they ought to be called to account. And since all over the country, they've been killing us. Even this white woman, been on the force 30 years. She had been a trainer. The conditions were such that when this young guy up in Minnesota, Minneapolis, was shot dead by this woman who supposedly mistook her taser, mistook her pistol for a taser. First of all, they're not made out of the same material. The pistol is much heavier. The taser was yellow. She said, though she's the one who's handled guns and she carries a gun, and she carries the gun on one side, the taser on the other. She pulled the gun off the gun side. She told a lie that she mistook the gun for her taser. And then she boo-hooed in the courtroom, and the judge had mercy on her. Let a private citizen do that. And they say you're a lying wonder and God's got your number. You mistook a taser, you mistook a gun for a taser. Citizens could not get away with doing to people and telling the lies that are accepted by way of excuse that the police do. Police are told, if you tell a lie, hug it all the tighter. It's known that they lie. What can be done about it? It's up to the citizens, not just to have vigils, not just to put up makeshift memorials. we need to bring pressure to bear. Maybe with the Democrat in the White House, I can write to him and see if he will notify the U.S. Attorney here to participate in an effort to find the source of these guns, not just the ones that are in the hands of young people, but illegal guns that are on the streets in the hands of older people. I've told you all this before, but I'm gonna tell it again. This old deacon got tired of hearing a kid say, "Lord, clearing the spider webs out of my life." And the deacon told him, "Don't ask the Lord to clean the spider webs out of your life. You killed the spider." I'm tired of talking about illegal guns. I want the officials whose job it is to find the source and at least diminish the number of illegal guns in our community. And quoting the canary who found out that the cage door was open, I'm out of here.
Thank you for watching The Ernie Chambers Show. If you'd like to make suggestions, email us at ewcfacts@gmail.com. That's ewcfacts@gmail.com. This has been an EWC Communication production.